Hi, my name is Benedict. This is a walkthrough for my new refill for the Algorithm FM synthesizer. We'll start with housekeeping first, just so we all know we're on the level playing field. In terms of the mastering, we're going through a tiny bit of saturation to exciteify it. I pull back the synth level just a little bit to help it balance with my Everdrone and voice, and the maximizer is simply providing a soft clip to make sure that we don't overexcite your speakers. In terms of the synth, it is going through a couple of processes. There's my echo nest and a reverb. As we all probably know, FM synths are prone to being kind of dry, but they really come alive when they're processed. It just makes it much easier for you to hear how these are likely to sound in a mix. There are effects on most of the presets because you probably don't want them to come into your track 100% dry, but I expect this is a little bit more like how they will be used. So let's start at the top with basses. Real nice FM-y sort of sound. A lot of the names here, as I discussed with thoughtfulness, are a little wild. You will note some reference to things like a Rickenbacker, known for being a very clanky bass. Hence some clankiness in the sound. Most of the sounds will respond in some way to the mod wheel, but not always. Some changes are mild, some are fairly extreme. So here we're taking this operator and changing its level. So really making the most of what FM can do for us in terms of basses. Beautiful lyrical kind of bass. And of course you can play higher up. This one is in mono because it has quite a lot of release. The name Dig In is to encourage you to have at it with a compressor. Thanks whoever's beeping at me. I, to be honest, don't love the compressor built into Europa Grain and Algorithm. I think there are better things, including the M class, that you can have at this with. This one's designed to get sort of fretless with a rocker pedal kind of feel to it. It's just me. One of those ones you're not going to find a place for until you do, and then you go, ooh. Just kind of playing tribute to a Fender Precision bass. Obviously doesn't sound like one, but pushing a fair bit of drive. Reference to, of course, everyone's favourite mustachioed bassist, Lemmy, who played a Rickenbacker. For those who feel the need to sub, that's that sort of take on the classic DX100, which I used to own, and the sub bass sound in there. So that's our basses. Brass, plenty of brass from me, of course. designed plenty of movement on the mod wheel for variety of tone, as we'd wow with our mouth in the little fart tube. So different variations of timbre. So if you're making a piece and you want a brass section to build this way, or you want counter melody with various brass parts, or you merely want to have your melody move through different instrumentation, which is very common in real world instrumental players, then you can actually mix and match all the different tones. Almost begins to get a little bit saxophony. Taken as though it were a pipe organ. Take on the classic sort of fanfare. Hail to the Queen! You've got a lot of delicacy inside that sound. If you're looking for full-on in your face sounds, that one's not going to do it for you. But if you're looking to have delicacy, you've got different timbres coming out in the stereo field. There's our straight brass sounds. Don't be upset, you will hear more brassy things later. Clearly moving in the theremin territory. So where I call things clarinets and oboes, don't necessarily think that they are that, it's just that's the kind of role that I would use them in a piece. FM's rather nice for creating woodwind sounds. Yes, we all heard they'd given up. Some of these are similar, but within a mix, and the way they play is slightly different. Not sure what you're going to do with that, but it's kind of cool. Obviously reference to the very famous Japanese composer player. Very cool guy. Again, that's going to be a tricky one, but you find the right situation. I was trying to see what I could do with regards to cloning a sound out of a track from a Fix record, the Fix with two X's, Don't think I got anywhere near it. Interesting sound. And of course there has to be one of these. And that's all of that kind of stuff that you will hear from me. I'm not a fan. It can happen. The synth's great for it, but it's not in my wheelhouse. Pads, of course, being one of those areas that that FM synthesis just really shines in, literally. Having the inbuilt little step sequencery things, kind of cool. Don't use it a lot, but it does serve some great purposes in things like this. So some sounds will be set to start quite muted and brighten with the wheel, some will be starting quite bright and then mute with the wheel. So if you open something up and you think, yeah, but that's not quite the tone I want, try the wheel. Oop. The kind of thing that digital synthesis just does so beautifully. As the name suggests, drift high, what happens is that the pad comes in and then actually lifts up. So it starts on your fundamental, but then as time goes by, the higher second and third harmonics become dominant because the first one drops out. Now the reason for that is, you can take it as two ways. One is that it just provides a kind of lift as it sits in the piece. But one problem we can have as mix engineers when working with big long pads is that they can sit there and become very static. It's easy to work on the top half of it, so you can filter it and various things like that. But one of the problems that we can face is that that fundamental just glugs up that area. You know, if we've got a great big chord, we've decided we want to hold a lot of weight down here, then it can fill the mix for far too long down there. So lifting allows that pad to still perform its function whilst leaving space for other things. It's one of those big, slightly uncomfortable, slightly discordant pads that FM's great at. Spooky! How to make people want to leave and get food. But you can obviously move the pitch around or just set it. It's a little zombie movie. This one's actually worth hearing with no effects. It's the kind of thing I'd end up using in a mix with as little effect on it as possible. They're very simple, just shows off what you can do with very small amount, and sometimes synth sounds are just super when there's very little to them. That real sort of ooey sine wave sound is a nice pad. A really nice, sweet, new agey sort of a pad. Ah, this one's interesting. If you've got your sub in front of you, you'll actually hear that it pumps in the bass. So not exactly kick drums, but there's that sense of having something going on underneath there. You may find it hard to find a purpose for it, but if you use it in the right place, not in the middle of a track, please, it's just going to be unmixable. But if you're using it as an intro or a small atmospheric thing between tracks, could work beautifully. One of those lots and lots of harmonics kinds of sounds. This is another one that just kind of cool. Obviously pays tribute to early Kraftwerk technique. Low, it's like moving a great big object across a room, you know, shoving the cupboard across the door to keep the bad people out. Quite an amount of timbral diversity of that covers very simple but beautifully effective FM techniques. Runny, swirly pads. Oh, you'll notice that I generally haven't used the unison. Nothing wrong with it. It is interesting, and it's nice to see a unison that's doing something different from every other unison. The timing differences. I know this is extracted from Friction, but it's interesting to see it here, because some things it's a bit kind of like, oh, geez, we've used those effects so many times, but it's nice to see a different take in a more synthy synth on the unison thing. But I distracted myself. You'll see that I tend not to have it on. While it's a very interesting effect, and I don't want the sounds to all have that unison sound. If you're wanting it, it's there. It's actually set up deliberately on some patches that you can turn it on, and it is going to provide a real difference. Some of them I didn't bother because I just didn't think of it, didn't seem the way to go. Myself, I'm not one of those unison users, but I'm not saying you shouldn't use it. If I'm looking for a bigger sound, I'm either going to layer or chorus or something like that. The grain within quartet is actually very nice. One of those nice but easy to overlook when you're going through patch banks sounds that will just sit beautifully in the right place when you use it tastefully. So you can set where your overtones go, like with quite a lot of the patches, and decide how ragged you want that razor edge to be. So a little bit of noise works very nicely there. Safe FM. It's a fairly simple patch, but it shows you how beautiful and effective FM can be. Because with a nice line inside a piece, it can either take the lead at a time or sit inside and just, you know, fill up your harmonics. There's a nice twitchiness built inside the sound. It's not going to overdo things, but if you're looking to just add that little bit of extra deep drama in something, it'll help. This one will too. As it slides into each of its sounds, we can get rid of the slide. Then control how much the slide occurs, which will make for a really nice thing if you found the right situation for it. Kind of metallic pan flute sort of thing. Again, very, very useful sound in the right situation. Atmospheric sound, surprisingly useful, even though not apparently super exciting on its own. Could almost go in sound effects, that one. So that's pads done. Well, it just wouldn't be FM synthesis if we didn't have some pianos. So a certain amount of versatility there, very, very bright DX style Rhodes. Kind of electric piano, again just like that pad where I talked about it actually drifting high as it holds, this does the same. Real character electric piano. So where you're looking for something that's going to have character, be unusual. Could be spooky, could be pretty. Rather than taking something and processing, you can have a sound that's reminiscent of, but starts again. Yeah, what if Wurlitzers were still being made? You hear it kind of swoops about inside there. Again, you're not going to use it in every situation, but if you're looking for a character instrument, you can get some nice function out of that. General polyphonic sounds. Ooh, this one's kind of cool. It's an additive organ, so if you were to set this up, and maybe Nectar will get around to doing it as well, but if you were to set this up with your 9 sliders on your slider control surface, that's like a B3. So you can then control your harmonics. If you don't have a rotary, or rotor in this case, from Reason Synths, which it does pair with very nicely, tried it, then you can open the mod wheel to give us that digital illusion of having a rotary, a Leslie. But that has no particular FM other than the ability to put feedback on the final operator to give yourself a little bit more extension for overtones. But quite simply, it's an additive synth where you dial in your first 9 overtones or harmonics in the series with the ability to increase the last one. If you hanker for a B3, there's a good start for you. There's even a little bit of if we look in here, there's a little bit of movement on a couple of the tone wheels and a little bit of noise in them as well. Not enough to be noticeable, but enough to just give it that little bit more edge. Let's go. These ones, accordions, those sounds that you just never want to have synthesized, and yet several bands had hits with them. This is the day. So the first one allows you to actually do the squeezying thing with the mod wheel. Obviously, the better you are as a player, the better that's going to work out for you. But if that bothers you, if it's like too hard with doing things with 2 hands, then there's the auto accordion. Where the fellow automatically squeezes it for you, currently set to a 4/4 squeezification. Don't overlook sounds like that. Once you process them, EQ them, find the right place for them in the mix, they can work beautifully for you. Kind of a mutant flute pad. It's a sort of harpsichord sound to make it more realistic, as though any of these are realistic, I've deliberately turned off all velocity. If you feel the need for velocity on a harpsichord, it's not a harpsichord anymore. Trust me, I know. I used to help build them with my father when I was a kid. This one's probably a little bit more that sort of, probably more Italian sound. You can warm it up. A bit more of a British sound. When you feel like being John Lord and are in a very bad mood. Flute. With some messing around with overtones through the mod wheel. If you are trying to go, oh, I'm going to pretend to everybody that I'm really playing a flute, not going to work at all, but if you find the right situation, great character sound. Doesn't know whether it wants to be an organ or an electric guitar. It's one of those sounds you've got to play it slowly. I'm just not in the right space for it at the moment to be getting it right. Quite a few guitars in here. You'll notice that there is a Resonator in here, which is basically the one, again, out of Friction. But a lot of the times I've not loved it, but do feel free to turn it on, because a lot of the times, again, it's prepared. And on the surface it sounds great, but like any of those, you know, take a snapshot and put it over the top like bunny ears on Instaham. There are good things about it, but then I find they can become a little bit of a trap. But a lot of the times they were set up, but they're more unique with them off more often than not. You might be like, why is that so bright and thin? If you know anything about the, I believe it's called Nashville Tuning, where they take the strings from a 12 string, which is the normal tuning, and one octave up, they'll put them on the acoustic guitar. So when you're watching Dwight Yoakam strummity strummity strum, if you listen, that's really, really bright in the mix. It's almost playing like a hi-hat type roll, as I've said quite a few times before. So that's a sound designed to some extent to be somewhat similar to that. That has its Resonator on, because it does thin the sound out nicely like that. So it's one of those ones you won't find use for, but then suddenly you will find a use for, because it's going to sit in a mix beautifully. If you have a good strummer that isn't named Joe, that can give you a realistic sort of feel, it's not going to replace Dwight Yoakam, but you might get some really interesting feels from there. Just a really nice sound. I know some people are offended by nice sounds, but it's a nice sound. One where the Resonator did do a nice job. Sounds nice already. Very Very pleased with that, very pleased indeed. Not quite as bright as the Nashville, it's designed to ring out. From the man who sings about Charlotte, occasionally. A kind of preset rock organ B3 type thing. That one probably should have been in electric pianos. Ooh. They're just always fun. Again, possibly could have gone into the brass sounds, but it's more a synth sound. And another guitar. Just a fantasy of, you know, your Gibson Les Paul with no cabinet or whatever. So you can use that versatile to whack it into cabinets and what have you. Sound effects. So lots of bells, of course. Not really going to work very melodically a lot of the time. There's a lot of hammer sound on it, but designed to just let there be rock, something like that. One of the great things with FM is that it's wonderful for building cracked bells, because of course a cracked bell doesn't produce a pure tone. In theory, a bell should produce a beautiful clear tone. But we're now so used to the fact that lots of bells are a little bit cracked, so we can mess with our harmonics. We can brighten this one up a lot. Time for Father Brown. I love bell sounds. For industrial. If I'd had this, I would have made lots of sounds for thoughtfulness, although then it wouldn't have been Thor, would it? But really great if you're wanting to do those kinds of tapping pipes in your basement kind of thing, which I used to do back in my EBM days. Made records out of that. Now, contrary to a certain amount of, well, misbelief, it's best not to make these sounds with the randomizer, because while pipes and bells can seem random, they're actually not. There's a perfectly good set of mathematical rules why this pipe sounds this way, and if you just go random, then you will get a sound and it might be interesting. But one of the problems is that while this is kind of a cool randomizer as these things go, I'm not aware of being able to opt out of randomizing certain things. I did find a way to do it, and happy to hear if there's another way to do it. But I did find that if you turn off an operator, so switch it out, do your randomization, switch it back in again, this will not have been messed up. But one of the frustrations with using randomizers is that they are random. They don't represent what might be going on in the real world. So the reason that this sounds fairly realistic as a tapped pipe going to tape is because it's actually carefully thought through. It's one of those creepy little sort of guiro type sounds. Very 70s, really cool. This is it's a real modular analog synth type sound, because there was a lot of FM being done on modulars. So a purer, cleaner, sort of big temple bell sound. You know, those great big things. Very nice indeed. Timpani. Sounds terrible in headphones because we're missing a low end. But I have deliberately put a fair amount of emphasis on the head of the sound. Lots of times when people go into timpanis, they're obsessed with the low end. And as I said to somebody about mixing yesterday, I said one of the problems with putting low end in a mix, or putting a lot of it in, is that you can end up with a mix that seems like bass with some stuff on top. And people will be like, oh yeah, great, but the song won't ever be remembered. So the same with the timpani. The bit that really gets you is actually the skin and what you're hearing from the outside of the kettle, not the great big bass, even though that seems like exactly what you got excited about. Strings, not a lot of strings. I like the idea of FM for strings, but struggle to find the right thing. So you'll see the first one out the gate here doesn't have a single bit of FM as such, although these are routing through each other. You see I'm only outputting these down the bottom. But I don't really care how we got there, because it does make a lovely sound. So you've got a 9 oscillator synth, even though only 3 are outputting, and wave scanning. Beautiful sound. Same essential sound. We've moved around our harmonics, so got that whole string section, you know, basses and cellos and what have you. It can get a little fluty, but it's a beautiful sound. So if you like the string but don't want so much of the piano on the front of it, if you want to get rid of it totally, you can do it there, but there is something very nice about that little ping on the beginning, which is why it doesn't fade out completely. This is where it becomes the debate as well. Do I use these or not? I decided not to most of the time. I used a lot of sounds similar to this in Red Skies, Yellow Sand, and was really delighted with how they behaved, because as anyone who follows me knows, I'm not a massive fan of string samples or any samples. I like them to a point and then find it's like, I can't quite get them to be what I want them to be, but synthesis will get me there. But deliberately just meant as one of those slightly ungainly string synth sounds, which you won't always find a place for, but definitely I would use that as what's called a ground bass. So you know, you sit your piece there, and then you've got your other stuff playing on top. Quite medieval, because it's got a nice grindy sound to it. And we have worked our way through, so I hope you found that very entertaining. Obviously, I would love it if you pressed the appropriate buttons, I think it's there, and purchased this ReFill and used it. And even more delighted if you popped on over to my YouTube or wherever and showed me what you had made with these sounds. You have fun now.